If I'm being honest with you guys, this is a shoe that I originally was not planning on reviewing. And let me tell you, I'm pretty glad I did, because we may have found our third contender for top shoes of 2025. Meet the Salomon Aeroglide 3. What's up everybody, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Today obviously we're talking about the Salomon Aeroglide 3. If it's your first time watching one of my videos though, you may notice some timestamps below in the description. Feel free to jump around to the various parts of this review, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate if you come back and watch the full thing when you get a sec, as I put a lot of time and effort into these videos. And if you've been a viewer for a while but you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please consider doing so today and turning on notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video, which is typically Monday through Friday. Now to start us off, let's talk about some quick disclaimers and disclosures. As I already mentioned, I received this shoe for free for the purpose of a review directly from Salomon. That being said, I was not paid, I was not given any talk tracks, talking points, no one watches these videos beforehand. I'm not actually obligated to make any specific content, and all thoughts are entirely my own. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the intended use of this shoe. The Aeroglide is Salomon's daily trainer built for the road. Now Salomon has been more of a trail brand over the last couple decades, but over the last few years, they've been dipping their toes more and more in road. I would consider this probably a standard daily trainer based off of use case and overall categorization, but we'll talk about the specs and a couple of things here in a second, and you can kind of decide for yourself where it fits, but it's definitely within the daily training category overall, and not necessarily geared towards speed work or racing. As such, that's how I plan on evaluating the shoe today. Now, from a price perspective, the shoe does come in at $160, which is on the higher end maybe of a standard daily trainer. A lot of them are coming in the 140 to 150 range, but 160 is definitely not out of that ballpark whatsoever. It's just a little bit on the higher side for the most part. Moving to the specs, the shoe comes in at 8.8 ounces, which is 249 grams, which is kind of on that middle tier in terms of weight for daily trainers. It's not going to be the lightest daily trainer on, but it's also not even close to the heaviest daily trainer on foot. It is just a good standard overall weight. Moving to the stack, you have 42 in the heel and 34 in the forefoot for an 8mm heel to toe drop. So this is where you could, if you want, kind of categorize this shoe as more of a max cushion daily trainer. I think more max cushion shoes though are geared towards recovery miles, and this really is geared towards daily miles and not just recovery runs, which is why I put it more in the standard daily training as opposed to the max cushion daily training. Now from a fit perspective, I would say that the shoe fits true to size lengthwise, and then from there I would say that the shoe actually fits pretty wide. I found that the heel was very wide for the most part. Not so wide that I had like heel slippage, but if I hadn't cinched down my laces tight enough, I might have ended up with that. One thing too is I didn't do any downhill specific running in this shoe, and so I potentially would need to use the runner's knot if you were doing a lot of downhill. The midfoot I wouldn't call full wide, but I would call roomy, and then the toe box I would say is kind of standard, so it does taper in a little bit, but for the most part this is a very, very wide foot friendly shoe in my opinion, and if you're borderline, you probably don't have to get a wider version of the shoe at all. Moving to the upper, you have a 3D seamless mesh, so you can see that there is some kind of stitching there for the most part, but on the main piece of the upper, a lot of those are, I don't know if they like bond them either chemically or with heat or anything, but the overlays are not stitched in. It's just kind of around the ankle collar there with some extra cushion is where you're getting a little bit of the extra stitching. The tongue is going to be kind of sewn in there or stitched in, so even though I don't think you would call this gusseted, it does have good midfoot lockdown there. So again, despite being wide, the tongue isn't sliding around at all, and neither is your foot so long as you cinch down to your appropriate kind of tightness in the shoe. That end, even though it has a wide heel, you don't have a heel flare, and so it actually curves in if anything, so you're actually getting some good heel cupping there that does keep your heel in place. And then you have some good cushioning here that isn't going to be rigid, so even though it does curve in, it's not going to be rubbing on your Achilles there. At least for me it didn't, and so that's sometimes a concern when you see that curvature there, but it wasn't a concern at all in the Aeroglide for me. Now I find this level of cushion in the upper to be really, really nice. I like having just a tiny bit there around the heel to keep that lockdown. It's kind of a more mid-weight tongue. Like it's not just like going to be one piece of mesh or anything, like, so you do have a light cushion there, but for the most part I feel like the upper does a good job of being fairly breathable overall. It's not going to be the most breathable shoe I've ever worn, but being like minimal in some good ways, but very structured and giving you some good lockdown and comfort overall. Now, I mentioned in my introduction that this shoe may end up being in my top 3 of the year, and that comes in large part because of the midsole foam that they're using underfoot. Now, full transparency, it's really hard for me personally to put a plated shoe in my top 3 shoes of the year, just because I feel like the plate actually limits the versatility. I don't believe in using any type of plates for daily use. And so for me, we're really looking at the lightweight trainer category and the daily trainer category, or maybe like sometimes like the max cushion plateless super shoes, right, can kind of throw their hat in the ring when it comes to my top shoes as far as like what I enjoy most. And so when I get a daily trainer with a really good responsive fun foam underfoot, that's what gets me the most excited, especially because the price is going to be very competitive. So they call this foam Energy Foam Evo, and what it is a super critical TPU foam. So it's kind of got that beaded vibe or look that you may see in a lot of like Salomon shoes, although Salomon has moved more and more to PIBA. It's interesting, like when you feel it, it's very structured. So PIBA foams tend to be very squishy, and they'll collapse and squish down when you're standing in them, right? TPU, or at least supercritical TPU, in my experience, has really good structure and doesn't compress down a ton when you're at a standstill. So you get really good structure and stability just walking around. But then when you start to put energy into these foams, they tend to compress and rebound really well. So you have a very bouncy underfoot sensation. The sensation underfoot is similar to me to what you feel in the Super Blast, not to that extent, to be clear, but what you kind of feel in the Super Blast, and then kind of what you feel in the Neo Zen, right? So it's a bouncy underfoot experience. When you're running, you really do kind of bounce off the ground, and you get kind of that compression and propulsion. So for me, it makes daily miles really fun and enjoyable, as opposed to kind of that soft squish where that can be responsive, like think like maybe like the Nova Blast is responsive, but this gives a little bit less compression underfoot and a little bit more bounce and pop, which for me is my preference in terms of how I like to interact with the foam, especially a daily training foam. So that supercritical TPU to me is very fun. Now, the width of the shoe is fairly wide as well, so despite being bouncy, because it is TPU and not PIBA, right, you're gonna have a little bit more stability, and then also that width is gonna help with some stability. There were some times where I felt a little bit unstable because of how bouncy it was, so I'm not gonna say that this is necessarily stability friendly, right? If you're someone who wears stability shoes, not necessarily advocating for this as an alternative, but it is, you know, sometimes with these bouncy foams, like they're inherently unstable, and I don't think that that is really the case here. Now, from a pace versatility perspective, you really can do a little bit of everything in this shoe. It's not quite lightweight trainer territory where it's really light and has some type of PIBA blend or like racing foam blend, but it is definitely punching above its weight in terms of like daily training foam, where you do want to speed up some in this shoe, where you're gonna feel a little bit bouncier, a little bit lighter on foot, a little bit more comfortable underfoot than your traditional daily training foams. And so I think that, you know, you could probably take this up to, I would say it would feel comfortable up to like tempo paces, like maybe threshold paces. But if you were going to do something faster and kind of cut down and do some intervals, like maybe 200s, 400s, probably not the shoe that you want, but I do think it's capable of handling a workout. So this is going to be a really good shoe if you want one in your rotation. You're just, you know, you're someone who maybe you're newer to running, you don't have a full rotation yet, maybe you want a shoe that's a little bit more versatile. That's where this kind of shoe comes in. It's why they sit highly on my list. If you think of my top 3 this year so far, we have the Evo SL, the Neo Zen, and the Aeroglide 3. Like, those are probably my top 3. They're all within that daily training category. They all can either race up or race down, which is really cool. I would run a longer race in this shoe. Like, I'd be confident in this shoe going on a long run, like 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 miles because the foam is that fun and that supportive at the same time. Now, looking to the outsole of the shoe, you have the Contra Grip rubber there, which is a staple in any Salomon shoe. And honestly, this is as good, if not better, than any outsole on the market. It is actively very, very grippy. I don't know if it's the material or if it's the tread pattern, but it does a phenomenal job. You can feel it actually gripping the ground when you run. I can't really say anything better about the outsole. Like, it's actively gripped. You actively feel it gripping the ground. Like, it does a really, really good job. I would not be concerned in any terrain in the shoe other than maybe if the entire road was actually frozen over. So Contra Grip, it does great on trails. Come to find out, it also does great on roads. Oh, and by the way, there is a gravel version of this shoe, which is going to have some light tread, kind of a road to trail version of the shoe. So if you're someone who like does want a do-it-all shoe, the gravel version of the shoe might be a really, really good option to take on some light trail. Honestly, this could probably handle some nice, like really, really well-kept dirt trail and bark chip trail, maybe even gravel trail, to be honest, depending on the vert and inclines that you're going to be facing. So as far as who's this shoe for, this is a shoe that is going to have some really, really mass appeal. Coming from Salomon, which is mainly going to be seen as a trail brand, I don't think a lot of people are going to be kind of taking the risk of buying the shoe, to be honest, but I do think that they should. This is a really, really good daily trainer, and depending on how I finally decide to categorize the Neo Zen and the Evo SL, like this may win out that category. I talked about it last week in my top shoes so far of 2025. Like, I have a hard time seeing a standard daily trainer come in that is better than this overall, for my preferences, to be clear, right? If you're someone who likes something a little bit softer and squishier underfoot, this might not be the move, right? If you're someone who likes something a little bit firmer even, this might not be the move. It kind of sits in the middle there. It is softer. I actually really liked the Cloud Surfer too. I know a lot of people didn't, but it is softer than that and more bouncy than that. And so, like, from a standard daily trainer perspective, I think that this takes the cake so far, obviously this year, and some really crazy shoes are going to have to come out to dethrone what I have in my current top of each category and current top 3 overall. So I think this shoe is going to be really, really good for people who have one shoe rotations especially, right? It is a shoe that is versatile. Is it going to shine in the intervals? No, not necessarily, but it really, like, I do believe it's responsive enough and bouncy enough that it could handle that though. So, you know, you don't get a lot of shoes in the daily trainer category which really do take the do-it-all kind of feel to that level, but there's just so much good going on in the shoe that I do think, like, it's worth the try for most people to get it into their rotation. So just some final thoughts. Honestly, this year with shoe releases, like, it's been pretty crazy who's taking my top spots. You know, some really, really good brands who have done really, really good things, but typically aren't dominating that daily training category. Mizuno and Salomon topping into my top 3 overall on the year. So if anything, that just gets me really, really excited for what else is to come through the rest of the year. Who's going to kind of be the next brand to step up their game? The daily training foams are just next level across the industry. So Salomon Aeroglide 3 really blew me away. Every additional mile that I put on the shoe, I ended up liking the shoe more and more. You can even go to my group chat. I have a group chat with a couple other reviewers. We do multi-tester reviews for WeViews, and we're testing the shoe right now. And every time, after every run, I would message the group and just say, yeah, the shoe's great. Like, the shoe is worth the hype. It went from, hey, I think this is a daily training competitor, to, hey, I think that this is, like, potentially going to be a top shoe of the year competitor. I don't think it's going to take that, but it's up there. It's that good. And so far, like, the others who have tried it agree. So really, like, I was very surprised by it. I didn't expect to dislike it by any means. I expected to like it, but I didn't expect to love it. And I honestly have loved the shoe so far. So if you stuck around this far, I sure appreciate you. Please take a second, let me know in the comments what questions you have about the Aeroglide 3, as well as what I could be doing better as a reviewer to make these even better, more educational, informational, just entertaining for each and every one of you. And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, please consider doing so now. Turn on notifications as well. And as always, we'll wrap up with a question, which is, what has been your surprise shoe of 2025? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.